Then I think we should give the first word to Grzegorz. By the way, consideration, do we want to continue within the mural board, or do we first want to discuss this within the document?
I don't know the answer here, so.
Let's we can start with the document and then see what ideas we can move to the board.
That sounds good to me.
Sounds good.
Yeah, so I had spent some time on trying to understand this problem better. And it's interesting because recently I saw two security issues that we had to fix that are kind of related to CI job tokens. So it appears that there is not only a product need in terms of the customer need to resolve that, but there is also a significant need from the security side of how we are using CI job token. And we need to definitely work on more fine-grained permissions for that. And I dropped the links to security issues in the agenda in case of someone of you would like to read them. And also Marius from the CI team is working on these security issues, and we had a call today, and we found a nice approach of solving these issues that will also allow us to build on top of that to resolve the issue about more flexible permissions. And long story short, I think that we actually need a POC because CI job tokens are quite complex in terms of how the support of using CI job token has been built. And without a good POC, it's quite difficult to reason even where we should put the configuration, whether it should be in the user profile or per group or per project. I know that we prefer to put it on per project or per group basis, right? But working on the POC might give us more insight into how the UX and UI is going to look like. So I think that the POC should be the first iteration here, and that's my proposal.
Can while the POC is being done, in parallel, can any UI UX or at least UX flow be thought through, or do you advise that we wait until the POC concludes with the findings? The reason I ask is I wonder if we can save some time with me working with the designer and talking through what would be the ideal workflow for how a user would even use whatever solution we come up with. Like, how would they attach these or assign these permissions or whatever to a pipeline?
So I think that we do need POC exactly to understand that better, that part.
Okay. Okay. Does everyone agree that I'll take the original issue for the pipeline permission, promote it to an epic and create a child POC for it, and then swap out that POC, put it in 13.2 and move obviously the epic will be taken out of 13.2.
I think it makes sense.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so then for the description of the POC, Grzegorz, would it be simply to demonstrate a working approach for usage?
Perhaps the most simple solution is that you create the placeholder issue and
Okay.
with the content, I mean the title and just the description, right?
Yeah, okay.
I will simply write the description so that it's easier to understand by engineers.
Sounds good.
To go back a little bit on the proof of concept you've been talking about, remembering from last meeting, I think we were a little bit on between two strategies, right? We were either gonna, extend the personal access tokens to be usable, or it was gonna be to extend upon CI job token and make that, make that accessible in the UI somewhere. Have we already like, have you discovered that one of those options is absolutely not possible, or?
No, I think that both are possible, but it's why the POCs needed to understand better which approach is going to be more simple. And of course, I also like to stress that the simple does not equal easy, and I would prefer to have a simple solution. So even if reworking CI job tokens might be more work, if it leads to having a more simple code base and user experience, that's probably better than introducing yet another token somewhere.
Understandable. So the idea for the proof of concept in that case is not to expose it immediately towards the user. It's more about like figuring out what the simplest like backend approach towards this is, right?
Yes, exactly. And there is one additional question I would like to ask. I managed to go back into the history of this issue because it appears that it is marked as the original issue has been marked as a duplicate. It had been moved a few times from different projects, and I saw that the previous iteration of this issue is actually an issue with more than 300 upvotes about being able to push code using GitLab CI tokens. So I thought that the conclusion from our previous call and from the user stories was that the problem to solve is to actually make it possible to use the API. And now I think that perhaps pushing code might be also important, and I struggle to understand which is more important and should be our core focus right now, because it might also affect how the POC is going to look like.
I'm trying to understand exactly what the difference is here. You mean through, like, the thing I'm wondering about is, say that we implement this like from an API perspective first, will it still affect either personal access tokens or CI job tokens? Like, is it the same problem but just no interface, or is it something else?
So I think that currently you cannot use CI job token to push code to repository. And there was an issue about exactly this problem, and users wanted us to make it possible to push code to Git repository using a CI job token. And if you go to the last comment in the issue, I linked the previous issue there, and you can see that it has more than 300 upvotes. So it feels like this is important. And pushing code using CI job token is different than communicating with API, obviously, because you use Git itself to push code from the context of a CI build. And instead of providing your access token or your password, depending on how is your GitLab instance configured, you can use a CI job token to authenticate the Git push request. Whereas in case of Git API access, you are just using some HTTP client to hit the API endpoint. And this is just a different thing. You can, of course, use API to create commits as well. But if you have created a commit in the context of CI build, this is the commit that you want to push instead of creating new one using the API. So there are two significant use cases of extending permissions of CI job tokens. One is giving them full access to the API, and second one is giving CI job tokens access to pushing code to GitLab repository. And I wonder.
Can you repeat that?
Yeah, it's Grzegorz referenced his comment in the issue as well, right? I'm reading your comment that you just made in the issue itself. To answer your question, Grzegorz, I'd rather make the priority access to the API, but is is it one of those things where you can only do one or the other in the proof of concept?
It depends. It depends on the approach taken in the proof of concept. But I think it's possible that the proof of concept will demonstrate a way in which we can actually control permissions more, but will not add new abilities to CI job token in a way that it won't, the proof of concept won't make it possible to communicate with the API, or won't make it possible to push code to Git repository with CI job token, but it will refactor code base in a way that we can actually control what the permissions of a CI job token is going to be, and how this is going to look like. So it's possible that the POC will just demonstrate that we can do that and that we know how to control these permissions, but won't add more features to CI job token, and adding more features might be done to a subsequent iteration. So this is something that is possible, and only the engineer working on the POC is actually going to be able to answer the question, what can be done within a POC, right? But it's possible that we will need to iterate on that more.
Okay.
Sorry, Tao, could you please add the comment from Grzegorz from the issue to the notes here about the two use cases that we kind of skipped?
I got to his, he has it in the notes already.
So where is that? Can I ask?
He linked to it in C. Is that where it is? Oh, wait. I mean,
To make sure that everyone is on the same page, because I also...
Yeah. Let me make sure that's
No,
where
it's one C.
it's in C, right? Agenda item C.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's how I got to it before this meeting.
I would like to invite everyone, by the way, to help take notes, because this is a hard conversation to follow, and we're skipping fast over points. It's really hard to keep track here.
Okay, so on this one, oops. Let's see, agenda. Well, let me retract what I said about, let me, at first I thought reading the original issue that we wanted to make access to the API the priority, but let me think about that for a moment, because the other part of what we want to achieve in this issue, when I look at the description again, are some of the scopes. And one of the scope is being able to write to repository. Grant right to private projects.
I think it's important for us to not lose sight of what is the problem we're trying to fix, because just exposing existing functionality and not adding on that, well, it's cool that we have done that, but if it doesn't extend upon our capabilities, then we are not solving the problem, right?
Yeah, of course. So then I think that POC is actually not something that we are going to ship to users. It's something that will make it easier for us to understand all the edge cases. But then the first iteration that we are going to ship to users will combine the POC with something that is useful. And it might happen that we will be able to add API support and Git push in the first iteration that we are going to ship to users, which is going to be second iteration on the issue, because the first one is going to be the POC. But yeah, but we need to have the POC first, and then after the POC, the feedback we will get from the POC will allow us to prepare something that we are going to ship to users.
I'm fine with that, but I just wanted us to be aligned that, hey, if we're gonna do a POC, like what is the time in which we're gonna do that, and how it's gonna affect milestones? Because like it's mostly a question towards you, Tao. It's like if you are intending for this feature to be shipped in 13.02 or 13.03 and be user facing, then we need to think of that. Like, hey, if the proof concept is not going to be user facing, it's not going to add user value, we're not solving a problem, then effectively that issue is not scheduled for 13.3, right? It will be the second iteration that will be user facing.
So
Yeah,
I think if the POC is going to be 13.2, then user facing will be 13.3. And isn't that as simple as that?
No, because Grzegorz, if there's going to be some UI UX work that has to happen after the POC, that's what Dimitri is alluding to, is we need to allow for that. So agreed, Dimitri, I'm aware of that. But I don't know that this is a very complex feature we're trying to deliver. I don't know that it can be avoided, that we allow all of the steps in between that has to happen that will delay a user facing MVC. That's why I was asking if there was anything that could be done in parallel to shorten that time before we can have an MVC presented for user on this feature. So what we can do, I don't want to shortcut this at all. So it may be that I have to reconsider how soon that it is three milestones out before we can deliver this. We'll see how it goes with the proof of concept. I just created a stub issue just now. Let me copy the issue link into the agenda. And where in the agenda did I say that?
If possible, I would like after this, because this is mostly planning related, right? But I would like to dive a little bit into that proof of concept, like what exactly is going to be the goal of it, how we're going to approach it, and how we're going to deliver on it. Like, what are the things we want to get out of it, right? Like, to me right now, it sounds like a great idea, but I've not really, like, it's a little bit blurry as to, you know, what is it going to be?
So this is a very interesting feature, because I believe that actually UI here is quite simple, because we probably need to put a few checkboxes somewhere in a similar way that we are currently doing that with personal access token. But there are some aspects of this feature that are kind of interesting in terms of UX, because, for example, how to provide feedback to a user that they can't do something with their CI job token because it has been configured somewhere in a project or group that reduces the amount of abilities and permissions that their CI job token has. So I think that although the UI might be quite simple here, and we might be able to allow the engineer that's going to work on POC collaborate with a designer to design the UI, the UX part won't be clear until we actually conclude the POC.
Yeah, like the intent I had was to not focus at all on any user experience, or at least not UI. The experience might be affected, but it's mostly like, hey, what are we gonna like get out of this proof of concept, like, and how we're gonna approach it, like, because as far as I now know, like, and I'm just grasping here, right? Like, I've not done it's like you know more than I do. It's like we have the API approach, we got the like the personal access token approach, we got the CI job token that is kind of like mingled in between. I'm trying to understand, like, are we gonna proof of concept one of those strategies and see if it works, and if it doesn't, we go on to the next one to see if that works? Or is it more like, no, I have like one of those strategies that is gonna be the one that we're for certain gonna go with, and we're gonna build the proof of concept, and that's gonna answer this, and this question?
So I think that, of course, it's complex because it depends on how someone is going to approach this proof of concept. It's possible that it's going to be me, and how I would do that is that I would take the solution that appears to be to me to be the most simple one, and again, the most simple one, it does not mean that it's going to be the easiest solution that I can find. But I'm going to take the solution that feels that be the least complex from the backend side, which is not going to introduce a lot of complexity, new tokens, many different things. So I guess that it's going to be taking the CI job token and figuring it out how we can augment CI job token with permissions that are defined somewhere, either in a project level, group level, or a user profile, depending on what is going to be the most simple approach for the first iteration and the most useful one, of course. And so it means that I would actually start with trying to understand what can be done with CI job token, whether we can take some set of permissions or scopes defined somewhere, combine that with permissions that are coming from the CI job token as it's related to a user, and the user has some permissions. We combine the two and see what happens when we process CI workflows that we currently do support, right?
Vitika, just so you know, and for everyone, we're talking now, and you can move your notes down there, Vitika, on agenda item D, where Grzegorz is actually, and it answers your question, Dimitri, that what exactly Grzegorz is proposing the POC to focus on.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, that seems to be in line with what I was thinking.
Yeah,
seems and will be the first iteration.
Yep.
Yeah, like I want to the only thing I want to make sure is that we all understand what we are going to gain from this proof of concept. Are we clear on that? Then I'm fine. But it's hard to really get a grasp of that. But to reiterate what Grzegorz has said, he will see if it's a feasible approach regarding what can currently be done with the CI job token. But what I don't understand yet is how does this relate to the personal access token, and how does this relate to the API?
So it does not relate to personal access token, because personal access token solution is a completely separate one. And it means that we would not actually do anything with CI job token, and instead we would make it possible to configure personal access token that are a little different, that perhaps are more ephemeral and short-living, and can be scoped to some resource like a pipeline on a build. But this concept feels to be more complex than what we actually need to achieve. Perhaps it could be more flexible in regard to other resources that are not related to CI, right? But perhaps this way we could have a ephemeral access token, let's call it that way, that might not only be scoped to a pipeline, but might be scoped to different resource. That is actually hard to imagine what it could be, but these resources can be very different. So I think that the usage of ephemeral access tokens might be interesting, but it might also be kind of orthogonal, and figuring it out how to add support for these ephemeral access tokens and figuring it out how to solve this issue, it feels like it's too many problems to solve at once. So I would prefer to focus on trying to understand what can be done with CI job token, and if it proves to be too complex, then the ephemeral access token is probably another solution that we could pursue if the CI job token appears to be too complex. But I think it might not be too complex. So that's, that's how I imagine it looks like right now.
Gotcha. So gist of this, what I get is that, CI job token from a first point of view seems like the approach that we will have the best chance with to figure out exactly what we can do with that. Based on that, we would perhaps diverge to other strategies, but ideally we would figure out this, and then based on that, we can make decisions.
Yes, exactly.
All right, thank you so much. Yeah, I'm fine with that. So it seems that proof of concept will need some time, and you know, like we're gonna be blocked from a like UX point of view, but also like from a like actually solving this problem until after proof of concept this will be done. So I think the remaining question would be like how we're going to schedule that proof of concept. Is that going to be part of 13.2?
Yes, I'm going to make it. That's what we said earlier. I'm going to make it part of 13.2. Grzegorz, in the agenda there, and I'll link to it under to the original story. If you can add some technical details to that stub issue. I think this particular original issue for our discussion, making pipeline permissions more controllable, flexible, was assigned to you for weighting. Could you instead also, I mean, actually there's already weight that was put on the original issue, a weight of 5. Can you throw a possible weight on the POC issue when you add the details?
Yes.
I don't think, and I went ahead and assigned it to 13.2. So what I'll do is on the planning issue, I'll replace the original story that I've now promoted to Epic. I'll replace it with this POC issue instead. What just happened? That's odd. There it is. Okay, so it's interesting what it does to the original issue when you promote it. Instead of changing it to an Epic link, it closes it. Okay.
Can we tentatively schedule the follow-up issues as well? Like that we're keeping a close eye on that.
Oh, interesting. I thought it would pull in all the other issues that it's linked to, but it's not. Other than me putting the POC under this new Epic, what do you mean by, what do you mean, Dimitri?
So like the proof of concept does not take care of the original user problem. It will just, allow us to, figure out how to move forward. But we still need an issue to track the user problem. And with that will probably be, design work included. There will be, engineering work included. And I think it will be helpful to have that issue planned ahead of 13.2. In 13.3, like even if that's a little bit ambitious, I think it is good to have that on that horizon so that we can work towards that. And this gives like a trigger to UX to keep in close contact with Grzegorz. How are you doing with proof of concept? Is there anything like that we are already certain on? Those kind of ideas.
You have an issue that you created for that, didn't you? For problem validation, maybe. I'm trying to find it. In the original issue, you had there was some discussion between you and Jason. I'm trying to find it.
I'm mostly thinking currently about, because we're upgrading the issue to an Epic, right? We're that way losing track of the problem being scheduled for, or the problem solution being scheduled for a certain milestone. The only thing I'm saying is like, do we keep track of this beyond 13.2? If not, let's create the issue and put it on a milestone. We can change it if need be. It's just like we have that horizon to work towards.
Okay, create what issue? Because I don't even know how to create an implementation issue if I don't have the findings from the POC.
Yeah, so I think that we can probably create a placeholder issue describing that it's going to be first iteration after the POC, but we will fill the title or just description after the POC is concluded. And Dimitri probably suggests having this placeholder issue with a milestone not to lose track. That the next
Is it for
the implement?
Mostly, sorry, go ahead.
Are you talking about an implementation issue or a problem validation issue, Dimitri?
An implementation issue. Basically, like we need to keep track of this user story in our planning. Like how do we keep track of that? When do we intend for this user story to be implemented ideally? That was what I was thinking.
Yeah, that puts well, okay. So I have to think about that, because if I put something out there for 13.5, because like you said, we have to allow for potentially a milestone between 13.2, I'm sorry, it'd be 13.4, allowing for some UX UI work to be happening after the POC in its own milestone. I run the risk of moving that along, and I have been trying to avoid pre-assigning milestones out several milestones into the future when we really don't know. And it just gets really confusing for users to have a blank issue sitting out there. So I think it's enough that this is a pretty high priority that we're going to make a decision during 13.2. Now,
I agree here with Tao. Yeah, I think like we can also raise this question about creating a follow-up issue or a placeholder after the POC as well. I mean, yeah, I think we're gonna have this POC scheduled as a next step, and we can make sure that we have those issues created whenever we are there. So let's take one step at a time.
Like my last comment to that would, and it doesn't need to change anything. Like, I understand putting milestones on an issue will expose this towards our users, creating additional questions. That was not the way I was going for that. But I think also we have tried to solve this problem with our planning issues, which are not user facing. They're actually private, right? So we don't have that problem. So we can tentatively put issues in future schedules or future milestones. Even though they're on the issue metadata, they're not assigned to that milestone. In the planning issue, we already have like, hey, we probably will be planning to implement this in 13.4, for example.
I can put a stub issue that just says MVC under okay, so let me think about that. What you can, I mean, it's in the notes from this agenda. I want to think about that. And then what we can do is I could go put a comment in that the planning issue 2 milestones out.
Sounds good.
Okay, so do we feel like we are having an agreement on the next step? I cannot say steps because it's probably a step. Thanks a lot, Grzegorz, for doing all of this research and giving us information. Do we feel like we are okay to move on to POC as the next step and then catch up again?
Let's see.
When Grzegorz, when do you think it would be a good idea to meet up again in order to discuss any perhaps blockers you've discovered when creating the proof of concept? You know,
after we do have a proof of concept, we might schedule a new call on demand. Perhaps it won't be needed, and yeah, I think that we don't really need to schedule this upfront in advance.
Okay, I think Grzegorz and Tal, we can leave you as the DRIs for that, right? And then, yeah, just let's not make this conversation drag anymore. I suggest, yeah, whenever we have the POC ready, we will have the issue right now for the POC, we'll have the POC, and then we catch up async or sync if needed. So let's just leave it at that. Sounds good to everyone? Cool. All right. Thanks a lot, all. I don't know if anyone has anything to add on this.
So what I did in the planning issue for 3 milestones from now, oops, I'll put a note. Let me, Nadia, I'm going to put the note following 13, note number 13. There. There's a link to the comment I made to consider the MVC implementation following the proof of concept.
Thanks, Tom.
Yep, it's above in number 13, just so that it refers back to exactly that comment.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
All right.
All right.
Signing off.
Thanks, all. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.